Hello and welcome to another episode of Pat Bear's Anime Club. Every other Monday, I put up a new video where I take a look at something from the world of anime that I am interested in chatting with you about. It could be a deep dive into a subgenre, or a look at anime of the past, or perhaps I take a look at videos, or anime, I should say, anime that's coming out soon, shows that are coming out, like the new seasons or the previous season. In this case, I'm taking a look at all 14 Crunchyroll Originals, and we're going to rank them. Now, if you don't know the Crunchyroll Original brand, purchase by Sony when the combination of Funimation and Crunchyroll, Crunchyroll had an initiative where they were a two-tiered approach to producing new works. On the one side, they were going to invest in anime that was already either in production or about to be in production, and slap the name on it. Some co-productions there to facilitate those things coming out and to get like in on the ground floor. So they would always have those for licensing because they had co-produced them. So there'd always be content on their website, and then they could like do DVDs and all that other stuff. This is usually stuff that was from light novels or graphic novels, not graphic novels, light novels or manga. And then also some original pieces, like actual originals that had nothing to do with light novels or manga, or really were anime at all. Some of them certainly had the vibe of anime. Maybe those would be deals they partner with Adult Swim or just put them on their own site, English language first, and maybe dubbed into other languages later. And so, yeah, so that's where we get the 14. This initiative is over because of the whole Sony buying them and merging them with Funimation. But we're going to take a look at that right now and get into those 14 Crunchyroll Originals and rank them using tiermaker. So here we go. All right, great. Here we are using the tiermaker list. You'll find a link in the show description below if you want to check that out. We are ranking all 14 of these shows here from S tier to great, fine, no, and X-Arm. And we'll shortly explain why that's in its own category below no, with Dr. Ramun, Mysterious Disease Specialist, starting us off. This is an anime adaptation of, I don't remember if there's a light novel, but I know there's a manga, and this is fine. I thought the animation was totally okay. I don't particularly enjoy the story. I don't really like either of the main characters. I know that some people have a soft spot for this cast as the show progresses. Never really got that far, but you wouldn't necessarily know it's a Crunchyroll original because those are often considered to be poorly animated. And this is not. And I could see there being a future season at some point, just without the Crunchyroll Originals tag on there. You might not even know that this was a Crunchyroll original. You might just thought it was another anime show that came out that wasn't the other show about the young person with weird powers. Kimonomichi, something like that. That one I think did better. And they weren't the same, but they seemed similar. X-Arm. Let's just do it. We got to do it. It's in alphabetical order here. I'm going alphabetical order from the name of the animation. So that's why Fly Me to the Moon is listed as Tonikawa Over the Moon for you, because that's what the anime is called, even though the manga is Fly Me to the Moon. So X-Arm goes in X-Arm tier. It's got its own tier down at the bottom because, so this is an adaptation of a manga that some people like, and you wouldn't know it from the reception. It is awful. It is awful beyond the perceived awfulness of Crunchyroll originals. It is animated incredibly poorly. It looks terrible. It is done by a studio that has never done animation before. They've done special effects. It's a first-time director. The writing is awful. If you told me this was like a motion comic, I would be like, it's only an okay motion comic. The plot is terrible. The voice actors have been given nothing to do. There's often 3D models put together with 2D models because there are characters that don't move, but there's characters that do have to move, and they're just put next to each other. If the story is good, they have done a bad job with this. I eventually watched all of this, and I generally don't like things that are terrible. I don't watch things because they're bad. but I had to see. Um, this is so bad that it's like I might argue that you could probably watch a couple episodes of a no, but you should not watch X Arm. You should watch the opening animation of X Arm because it's not even the best of it. It's just very telling. You can't make up for bad animation and bad art with smoke effects, After Effects smoke, and they try. Very bad. Fena, Pirate Princess. I'll admit I didn't watch all of this. I'm going to put this in. This might drop down to fine, but I feel like I won't have any. No, you know what? It is just fine. I think the story is pretty blah. I think the animation looks good, which is why it's in fine, but the story is nothing to write home about, which is probably why it's not great. Um, it is totally fine. I know it did pretty well. And of the originals that like really feel like these are Crunchyroll originals, it is certainly the best looking. Like it looks like it was well done. It looks like other people put money into it because it seems like a lot of these Crunchyroll originals had a very low budget for the standards of the already low standards of the animation industry. As you can see in the Freak Angels, which gets a no. Freak Angels survives the X-Arm tier by the fact that it is short. I believe it is only 9 episodes. Maybe I should have had a category going with a Y, like Y question mark, not the letter Y, the word Y. So it's in 2020. They're like, maybe it's because Castlevania did well that they were like, we need our also like kind of foul-mouthed animated series, adult series. Let's option a Warren Ellis webcomic from like 2010. Why? Even if you give the grace of, well, when they announced it, there hadn't been the Me Too movement in comics hadn't already had a bunch of people come out and say, hey, Warren Ellis is garbage and was terrible to me. Even if you give that grace, Warren Ellis is already a garbage person with garbage writing, and so the source material is bad, and the production is bad. The animation has lots of shortcuts. The story is terrible. There are no likable characters. Any genuine moments in it, perhaps due to the source, is just undercut. I did not watch all 9 episodes of this. If this is a no, maybe you would like to watch it and laugh at it. Also, you know, it's like, well, it's in English, so there's no subtitles because it's not, you know, a subtitled show. But there, a lot of people like closed captions. There's no closed captions in this because they didn't need to translate it, so they didn't include any captions, which is just an accessibility issue. But also, it's bad. Speaking of bad, keeping Freak Angels comfortable is Gibate. I don't know how to pronounce this. This apparently, some people were jazzed about this series going in, and I can understand why. I think the music looked really cool. I think the opening was interesting. It's the idea of like this like ninja and a samurai, and they come into the future, and the opening has like some kind of monk in there as well, and there's like a red-haired punk girl with guns, and you're like, oh, all right. And there's monsters. You got to fight these monsters, and then the show just kind of unravels. I'm debating on what or not. I watched every episode of this. The music's still great, and some of the fight scenes really good. Obviously, you got your CG monsters. They don't look like they belong in the same anime, but the actual characters I thought looked good, and the fights often looked good. The reason why it's a no is many monsters are CG, and when they interact with humans, it's terrible. Also, the writing is very bad. The plot is awful. It's unbelievably awful. It doesn't make any sense. They tried to justify their plot that was weird of like, why do these characters transport to the future? Why are there monsters? What's going on? They did their best to justify it with like a reason, but the reason opens up 1,000 more questions and is bad. Every part of it is bad, and the big bad is bad. Um, it's just awful, but it's not X-Arm bad. It's just a bad piece of animation. It, for a while, was the worst Crunchyroll original, and then X-Arm saved it. So it doesn't even have that. Um, we've got more of these to talk about, and it's, yeah, I'm going through here. So let's keep going. Got more of these. We got some positive things to say about God of High School, which I don't know, is this S tier or is this great? I'm putting it in great. There's a lot to really love about God of High School, which is a manhwa. Now, if I read the manhwa, the webtoon originally, I probably would have issues with God of High School because this adaptation um, just like skips a bunch of stuff because it's not a weekly story that often repeats itself and allows itself for indulgences. It's an action series, and they condensed some stuff because they wanted to finish an arc. Maybe it should have been longer to complete that arc, perhaps. But beautifully animated, because it is like all these people fighting in a tournament. The like when there's a ring, when there's a fighting ring, it is sponsored by Crunchyroll, which I think is a very fun choice. Music is really great. It has a late episode reveal of a trope that I am a little over, but because they took so long to do it, I'm okay with that. It's got great vibes. I wish we had more of those like main characters interacting with each other kind of a thing, because there's like a small story and then a large story, and the large story is so large and there's so many characters, and it does feel very rushed, but I think it's like really good. It's really enjoyable. I think it's a pleasure to watch, and especially the kind of painterly effects for some of the moves. This is a labor of love, and I really enjoy it. So it's going in great. It's not S tier because it's confusing, and it could be S tier. It's borderline S tier, but it's not. But it's such a difference from like what I've just talked about, like X-Arm and Freak Angels. Like, oh, such a night and day. High Guardian Spice is on the original side, like done. High Guardian Spice is fine. It is a fine little series. It took way longer than it probably should have to come out. It is the series on this list that suffered the most from the like Gamergate or Comics Gate belief that like, oh, this is going to be woke, and this is just like Crunchyroll is really like, instead of focusing on great anime, they're focusing on this woke trash, blah blah, and it like suffered at the feet of a lot of garbage, and then so people wanted to defend it that otherwise probably would have ignored it as like a just fine series, and it's totally okay. It's totally fine. It is a totally fine series that took too long to make, had a lot of production problems, and yeah, if Crunchyroll hadn't been doing it, it probably wouldn't have been on anybody's radar, really. But there was so much heat on it. Unnecessary. Inspector, IN/Spectre, is great. That's a great series. Fantastic adaptation. You wouldn't know it's Crunchyroll Original. Season 2 is out. It's good. It's a good slow-paced detective series with a lot of it's a detective show with spirits and otherworldly events, and it's totally interesting and engaging, and totally worth your time. Noblesse. I'm going to put Noblesse in. Noblesse is another one of them, our manhwa on this list. I'm going to put Noblesse in fine. Noblesse could be in great. It's animated well. It's an interesting story. They changed some stuff to make it less Korean and more Japanese, which is like, I don't really love. My biggest issue with Noblesse is that a OVA came out in like years before the anime. Few years before the anime, kind of like tease the show and get interest, and I don't know why. But it's really just the first couple chapters, or like what would be maybe the first like 2 episodes of the show. And then the anime starts, and it doesn't recap the OVA, and it doesn't retell the OVA. It just assumes you watched the OVA, and that's awful. That does us no favors because while there may be some elements get rehashed as we go, it doesn't seem to want a general audience to give it a look. It wants diehards, and it's like, well, the diehards we're going to watch anyway. I don't know what we're doing here, so it loses points for that. Like having a probably non-emotive main character could be tough unless the supporting cast really stands up, and they do. It's got a lot of like, oh, these enemies are now our friends kind of things that are like a little trite, even when the web novel or the webtoon was out. It's just like, it's fine. It really is fine. On this list, it probably, like, maybe I'll look at these. Maybe it is great. No, I do think it's fine. Onyx Equinox, you know what? When I look at what's also going in fine, we're putting it up to great. Comparatively, because we are doing comparatively, you're looking at these 14, because like Onyx Equinox and Shenmue both go in fine. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about either of these. These are different approaches. One is an adaptation, one is an original. I think Onyx Equinox, like, it tells an engaging story. It just doesn't do a great job with it. It's like very forgettable, completely and totally forgettable. I'm sure that there are people that are furious at me right now because I know it has its fans. I just was like, all right. And then Shenmue, the animation, I forgot this was a Crunchyroll original. I forgot this was an anime. It feels like it came and went. It didn't do anything that great. It's not Freak Angels or Gibate or X-Arm bad. It's just fine. So honestly, Noblesse, which is also like kind of forgettable, isn't bad in any way, shape, or form. So it moves up to great. Like, that's what we're looking at here. Yeah, I think both of these are just completely, totally watchable and totally fine. But not good. Yeah. Soma Spider So What goes to S tier. We got our first S tier, my friends. Holy shit. I love Soma Spider So What. I know there are manga fans that were a little annoyed, a little miffed with this one. Because if you only read the manga, you were like, what is this? Why do they make up all this stuff? Because this series is jumping between the events of a bunch of isekai people who are finding each other in school and part of this larger fantasy world plot. They've been reincarnated. And then also one of their classmates is a spider and is off doing her own thing. And it jumps between the two of them. And the manga doesn't do that. The manga is chronological because you learn pretty quickly. It's not much of a spoiler. It actually makes it easier to watch, I think, if you didn't know this. The events that happen to the spider are from her birth. So the events of the people in school are in the future compared to that story. Whereas the manga decides to do chronological. They just start with the spider and then eventually we'll tell these other parts of the story. But the original version, light novel, and then later the anime decided to, because anime is based on the light novel, decided to go, oh, let's just go back and forth. You get to see way more characters. You don't get stuck in one place for too long. While I do think that the episodes that focus almost exclusively on the kids at school is less interesting, it is fun to like have that kind of like, oh, the thing we thought they were freaking out about is just kind of similar to what was happening to the spider, but it's not happening at the same time. They try to pull that a little bit. Plus, our spider is great. She's just such a fun voice actress. Excellent work. It is silly and fun and totally enjoyable. I really, really like it. I'm still reading the manga, and I think Soma Spider So What is a fantastic adaptation of a weird postmodern isekai, and totally worth your time. Some of the CG stuff doesn't look great. Some of the monsters don't look particularly fantastic, and especially, and that's forgivable because it's monsters. Later, there are soldiers that are done in CG by a different studio, and it does not look good at all. But I have to be forgiving for that because that's modern anime, unfortunately. And also comparatively, the whole thing isn't done in that awful style. A lot of it is in traditional or digital style that still looks really good. Okay, then we got Tonikawa Over the Moon for You, which is another S tier show. We're in our second season. The young people who are decide to get married and then get to know each other. That feel like they're destined to be married, and it is just these lovey-doveyness of them, like kind of coming, like figuring out what it means to date and what it means to live with someone and what it means to be in love. And it is lovely and great and goofy and fun, and even when there's conflict, it's character conflict and totally like it's adorkable. I haven't used that phrase in a long time, that portmanteau, but it is. It's very adorkable and really lovely. Fly Me to the Moon is a great manga. The anime adaptation is fantastic. You would not know this is a Crunchyroll original, which is a compliment. And then Tower of God goes in the apparently the Inspector and Manhwa tier because it's great. This is according to the friends, because I have not read all of Tower of God, but from my own understanding, this is closer to a faithful interpretation or of the source material adaptation, I should say, not interpretation, more so than God of High School, but still really engaging, really interesting. Beautiful to look at. Again, you would not know that this is a Crunchyroll original. It loses little points because some of it is like I'm not sure if the world building is bad or if we're missing out on it, but there are moments where I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be confused right now, but I am. That's just my feeling on it. And maybe Bam, I just want a little more from him. Just a little bit more from our main guy, but still enjoyable. Let's look at the tier here as we're wrapping up this video, because I still need to edit all of this together. It's going to be over 20-minute video. Okay, so we've got Soma Spider, So What, and Tonikawa Over the Moon for You in S tier. That checks out. In our great tier, we've got God of High School, Inspector, we've got Noblesse, and we've got Tower of God. That all seems to check out. Again, I bumped up Noblesse because compared to the fine tier, it doesn't fit in there. Dr. Ramoon, maybe, or Ramune, maybe if I had finished it, I'd be great, but it was fine. Then we've got Fena, which is like, yeah, that's totally fine. I don't think it's a no, so we're going to keep High Guardian Spice in there. Onyx Equinox, yeah, totally fine. Shenmue. Shenmue is not no, but it's definitely not great, so it stays in fine. Freak Angels and Gibate. I don't even think it's pronounced Gibate, but whatever. Both no's. No. And X-Arm is still X-Arm. So there you go. Now I'm going to switch back to the other screen. And that was me ranking all 14 Crunchyroll originals. In the comments below, hey, have you watched any of these shows? What are your thoughts? Let me know. I would love to hear from you about those productions. If you've watched any of the originals, or if you watched any of the anime. Maybe you didn't even know. Maybe you liked Inspector and you're watching the second season of it, or Tonikawa Over the Moon for You, and you're like, huh, no idea this was at one point considered a Crunchyroll original. Or maybe you didn't even know that some of those shows were web novels and your webtoons, and you were like, I didn't know they were manhwa. I'm going to check them out. Let me know in the comments below if you have any ideas for future videos. Love to hear that as well. And thank you for watching this episode of Pat Baer's Anime Club. I'll see you on the next one very soon.